Hey, welcome back. So we've got two new countries, Korea and Japan, and they both have markets for hats. They both like hats, and they also have a hat making industry. So they have a supply curve. SK, subscript K, stands for the supply in Korea. DK stands for the demand in Korea. Then we've got SJ for the supply curve in Japan. DJ for the demand curve, sorry, in Japan. And here's my expressions for the demand and supply curves. Q equals 50 minus 2p, Q equals 3p. I didn't label them, but of course you remember I don't really have to because, as you can see, if there's a negative sign in an expression and you're looking for the demand curve, that must be the demand curve because there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity on the demand, which you can see here. And then likewise, obviously there's no sign here, but this is a positive relationship between quantity and price. So this must be the supply curve. And then the next thing I'll do is just tell you quickly, remind you, because I know you know how to do this, but remind you how to plot these linear expressions. The easiest thing to do is to set the variables equal to 0 and solve for the other variable. So in the case of the demand curve in Korea, when p equals 0, this term becomes 0, so we have q equals 50, so that's 1 point on the Korean demand curve. And then when q equals 0, which is points along the vertical axis, when q equals 0, we can find that, I don't know if you can see this, but p will be 25. So we can plot our demand curve like that. And then for the supply curve, you can see that when p is 0, q is 0, so it must start at the origin, and the same is true for the other country because they have the same supply curve. And then I just picked one more point. I gave the game away. I told you what the equilibrium price is, but anyway, if we just pick one more point on the supply curve so that we can plot the supply curve. And same if we go over to Japan, then I did the same thing in terms of plotting the demand curve and then plotting the supply curve. And with the sketch, you can see that it looks like probably Korea has a lower autarky equilibrium price of hats, so they're probably going to be the exporter, but let's just check that. And now that we have expressions for the demand and supply curve, that's pretty easy to do. So if we want to find domestic equilibrium, which means we're looking for this point, then what we do is we set demand equal to supply, so 50 minus 2p equals 3p, and we can solve for p to find equilibrium price. So adding 2p to both sides, we get 50 equals 3p plus 5p, 3p plus 2p, getting ahead of myself. So 50 equals 5p, which must mean that p is equal to $10, which I already did. And then if I want to know quantity, the thing to do, of course, is to take the price and say, well, what would demand and supply be if the price happened to be 10? And we can so we could use either of these curves. You can see from the supply curve that when the price is 10, Q must be 30. So we have our equilibrium quantity as well, 30 hats per day. And we can perform the same operation in the market for Japan. So we get 70 minus 2p equals 3p. So 70 equals, we add 2p to both sides, so we get 70 equals 5p. Sorry about my terrible writing. And then 70, we can divide both sides by 5 to get p. So p must be 70 over 5. I'm stalling a bit. Okay, 70 over 5, if you check that, is $14. So equilibrium price in autarky in Japan is $14. And again, as we did for Korea, we can plug $14 back into either the demand or the supply curve to find equilibrium quantity in autarky. So in the supply curve, Q equals 3p. 3 times 14, that's 42. So let's write that there. Q equals 3 times 14, which is 42 hats per day. It's not very many hats. And this is our equilibrium, domestic equilibrium. And this time, now that we have our expressions for demand and supply, we can be exact. We don't just have to sketch it out.